bad.
What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. I'm your host, Ricardo Verendez, and today we have a great conversation. I just finished the podcast. It was a fun and informative and interesting conversation with professional athlete, lecturer, nutrition health expert, Brad Kearns. He's recently written the book, The Keto Reset Diet, also written Primal Endurance, both books he wrote with Mark Sisson, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with. He wrote the Primal Blueprint and has the blog Mark's Daily Apple. And I constantly talk about Mark Sisson because he's a huge influence of mine when it comes to diet and nutrition, and Brad Kearns also is too. And we don't get so deep into keto and into specifically nutrition and what he eats and all that stuff. We talk a lot about training. We talk about personal journey as an athlete and personal philosophies and opinions and all that stuff, and the pros and cons of sports and training and all, more about that type of thing. And I'll have him on again. We'll get deeper into keto. If you guys haven't gone back in the archives and listened to my show I did with Dr. Dominic D'Agostino, he's a leading expert in the ketogenic diet in regards to the science of it and all that stuff. And so if you want to really figure out specifically what is the ketogenic diet, then please check that out. Also, I did one recently with Dr. Thomas Seyfried, who looks into the benefits of the ketogenic diet in regards to fighting and preventing disease like cancer. And also I've done one with Chris Bell, who is the filmmaker who did Bigger, Stronger, Faster, and we talk about the ketogenic diet. Check out those shows. And today we get into, like I said briefly about it, Brad's a professional athlete. He was ranked third as a triathlete in 91. Third, that's crazy. I mean, when you think about how many people do triathletes, Dave, who I started this podcast with, he did triathletes. Always super fascinated with just the training and the eating and preparation and mindset and all that stuff. So we really get into that, and also how hard should you train and how much should you rest, and should you fight through injuries and tiredness and all that stuff. So I think it's really interesting conversation. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. Brad's just an awesome guy. Definitely check him out too on his podcast. He has one coming up, which he'll talk about and plug at the end of the podcast. So definitely check that out. If the podcast is out already, I will put links in the show notes like I always do. So if you go on our YouTube channel, RV Theory 6, you can see visually me and Brad have the conversation. You'll see the video version of this podcast and all our podcasts. So if anybody ever calls in using video, which Brad did, you can actually see us have the conversation. So check that out. And I'll put in the show notes links to my Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all my social media connections, and I'll do the same to our guest. So I'll put links to Brad's website, his books, all that stuff, and his podcast. So check that out. It's a just easy way to connect with the guests and look into more of their work if you find them interesting. So thanks again, guys. On this podcast, I go on a couple long rants. If you're listening to this episode, which is 160 something, you're probably used to it, but hopefully you guys just appreciate that I'm passionate about certain things, and sometimes it just comes out, and hopefully they're tolerable, because I get mad at myself sometimes because I'm just like, what the fuck am I doing? Why can't I stop myself from talking sometimes? But like I said, it just emotionally, I'm really passionate about these topics and subjects. Hopefully it resonates and it comes out. Enough said. Enjoy the show, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace. I believe
Hello, Vicky.
What's up, Brad?
Hey, man. All right. Sorry about that.
Hey, no problem. You weren't
I'm
that
getting my
late.
studio together.
Yeah, it always takes a little longer sometimes with just getting things set up, and Skype sometimes wants to update stuff right before you want to sign on and all this stuff. So yeah, it happens. No big deal. I mean,
I know.
we all got busy schedules and lives, but thank you so much for being with me. I'm a huge fan. I've been following you and Mark Sisson for a while. You guys are always popping up on different podcasts I'm a fan of, and I follow your guys' podcast, and always love hearing interviews. And it gets to a point where, now I feel like I've listened to so many interviews, I just keep listening to them, hoping I can hear something new, because sometimes it's a recurring theme, and you keep hearing the same similar information. But that's one thing I love about having all these guests on the keto diet, is that each one's been slightly different. And you being an athlete and somebody who's done triathlons and some type of golfing that nobody's ever heard of, but after I know you've brought it up a few times, speed golfing, and it seems really interesting, and it's from an athlete's perspective, because a lot of times keto's very often kind of looked at as a way to lose weight, and there's all these health benefits, and I had Dr. Thomas Seyfried, who talks about managing and preventing disease using the ketogenic diet. But I think people like myself, they're just interested also on the benefits of being an athlete, because I think for so long you've been told that you need glucose, you have to, you can't remove all carbs from your diet or whatnot. So I think that's one of the topics I want to get into today, just because I think it's a myth, and I think that there's a lot of just, I guess propaganda is probably the only word to use. There's been a lot of, in the food industry, there's just been a lot of propaganda of like, we've been sold that like, this is bad for you, this is good for you. And now it's like, we're trying to undo what's been done. And it's really hard, because people for so long have been told this is the way you eat, fat is bad, buy low-fat milk, buy low-fat yogurt, buy all this low-fat stuff. And really the culprit wasn't fat. And it was, I remember when I was going to school, the food pyramid was the majority of what we should be eating was grains and stuff, which looking back at it, it's just nonsense. And then what really drives me crazy is how many people are probably overweight, have joint inflammation, and have all these issues that affect their quality of life, and yet they feel like they're doing everything right, like they were listening to the recommendations, they were, and it's like people could have daily struggles because of this false information that was put out there by in some cases the food industry, which Gary Tobbs gets into, and some other researchers and stuff. But I'm sure I probably should ask the question in that long rant. but yeah, there's just so much I want to talk about. So first of all, let me just thank you again for being on. Like I said, I'm a huge fan.
Oh, thanks, Ricky. I hope you're recording that, man. You were on a roll there. That was exactly right. It's like, it's propaganda and this lifelong brainwashing from the food industry, and especially the athletic world, where we were first taught to drink Gatorade back in the 70s instead of water, and it may not have been progress. We maybe should go back and, go back to the days of before the energy gels, the energy bars, and the Gatorade, and maybe have a better potential to stay healthy as athletes. It's pretty funny when you think about it, because all we think about is the scientific advancements in sports nutrition means that athletes are racing faster today than they were. It's like, I'm not sure about that. But now we have the low carb scene is pretty exciting, because it seems like this could be the next frontier, this next evolution of peak performance for athletes, is to take them away from the carbohydrate dependency scene, which is bad for not only them, but for general society as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the thing that drives me nuts. And I my long rants, it's weird because I talk about so many different topics on this podcast, and they're all topics that I'm passionate about, and stuff that I enjoy talking about, or like I said, I'm passionate about and I'm interested in. And food and nutrition is something that I think has always motivated me, because it can affect the way you think, the way you feel, your ability to enjoy life. And one thing that you know, as you get older, you kind of put in perspective more and more is how short life is, and how, you know, we should be trying to enjoy it as much as possible. And you don't get to, you know, hit the reset button and say, oh, I wish I could, you know, let me start all over and make better decisions. Like you're stuck with decisions that you've made, and you have to just keep trying to improve and try to do your best to enjoy life. And to know that there's people out there who are dealing with, you know, autoimmune disease, joint pain, where they struggle to enjoy maybe playing with their grandkids or their own, you know, or their kids, you know, because I know even you know, hearing Mark Sisson talk about getting arthritis in his late 20s. You know, he had to retire from being an athlete in his late 20s, which is insane. And so there's all these people who are taken away from things that they enjoy and can't do the things they enjoy because of false information, and people who, and even worse, people who are dying because of false information, because nobody's telling them that maybe removing sugar from your diet when you have a history of cancer in your family, maybe it would help or whatnot. So it just, to me, it drives me nuts. And it's just, you know, my last podcast I had Joel Salatin on from Polyface Farms. He's a famous farmer and stuff like that. And like, you know, even just talking about the inability to kind of just farm without all these regulations and all this stuff. It kind of, the system forces you to have these factory farms, and it just, you know, that's why the word primal, I think, is such an important word, because paleo, you know, you always have that argument, well, that's not how people ate during that time and whatnot. But primal, it's more like, you know, and Chris Ryan, I don't know if you're familiar with Chris Ryan. He's been on my show. He wrote Sex at Dawn, but he's in the progress of writing. He's been in the progress for a while now, writing a book called Civilized to Death, and it really argues like what is progression. And this is a topic and conversation that, you know, when you look at technology, when you look at you know, capitalism, and you look at the way we eat, like there's so much that we can learn from looking at our ancestors and taking a step back and saying, okay, we think we're evolving because we're making food last longer, or it can handle these pesticides, or we think we're happier because we have more material things and all this stuff. But the further we get away from the way we used to live, the more we realize we need to go back, because we aren't progressing. People are unhealthy, people are unhappy. And I think these are all things that can be improved if we just look at where we came from.
Yeah, well said, man. It's gets lost in the shuffle today, especially my two big fighting points with my kids. You know, starting when they were pre-teens, I said, you know what I'm going to battle you guys on to the end of your days is screen time and processed food, because everyone accepts it as normal and routine part of life, especially for kids who deserve a better chance. Because if you think back to especially my generation, I'm 53 years old now, so my childhood was so different than today's. There was no computer until I was 20 years old. I got my first computer, and you know, the TVs were, you know, we had our 5 channels, and there was a good show on Friday nights at 9 p.m. that we'd sit around and watch. But the rest of the time, we were out and about, keeping busy and having authentic social interactions and being way more physical and way more active than you know, today's kid. I mean, even like my son was a big time athlete in high school basketball team. They'd have these brutal practices for 3 hours and play at a level that I couldn't even dream about back when I was a kid, because it's so much more sophisticated now. But the rest of the time, him and his teammates were playing video games for 8 hours, man. And I was out there working on my dribble or jogging down to the store to get a drink and come back and shoot more baskets. And it was just different. Everything's sort of accelerated, and we've left behind like the things you talk about is just the, you know, the ancestral inspiration for the best way to live, genetically speaking.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Do you think that, because I even think, you know, the thing about the way we eat, it has effect on everything. Even when you look at the increases of anxiety and depression and all this stuff, I mean, we are a walking chemistry project. You know, like everything we do, everything we eat, everything from the blue light to you know, caffeine, to everything has a chemical effect on our brain, on our cognitive function, on how much energy we have, how happy we are. All these things have effect. And do you think that looking at people who have changed the way they eat, they eat cleaner, they eat better, don't you think even mood could be something that could be improved, and people's quality of life in regards to mood and just being happier and dealing with anxiety and stuff? Because you figure, like, if you're eating really shitty food, the body and mind are connected, and when one feels good, the other one feels good, and it goes both ways. We like to think that they're two different things, but they're not. And as you know, with the placebo effect, right? I mean, your body feels better even if you are taking a pill that isn't doing anything. But so it's just it's mental. Do you think food could be also a culprit, and to have some blame, like the way people have been eating incorrectly for so long, could also be linked to this increase in anxiety and depression and all these other issues?
Yeah, you bring up a couple important points, and the first one is the actual chemical makeup of the food and the malnourishment of modern humans. Even though they're carrying excess body fat, we're literally malnourished. We're not getting the right agents to optimize hormonal and genetic function. And there's a lot of research showing, for example, that if you have gut dysfunction, you are messing up your production of serotonin, most of which happens in the intestinal tract. And that's the feel-good hormone that allows you to wake up near the sunrise in the morning feeling refreshed and energized. And it has a strong correlation to diet. Sugar has those it stimulates the same areas in the brain, the pleasure center, the opioid receptors, such that it's actually literally can be classified as a very strong drug, and you have the highs and lows just like you do when you're taking illegal drugs. So it's now being shown by respected science that this stuff is poison and has a immediately adverse effect upon ingestion. Dr. Kate Shanahan talks a lot about the consumption of these refined, high polyunsaturated vegetable oils that, due to their harsh processing methods, have sustained oxidative damage during processing. And then when you heat them up, for example, to cook your food in canola oil or soybean oil, which is the oil of choice in all restaurants, from fast food to the finest restaurants, for the most expensive steak is going to be fried in the bad oils. As soon as you ingest these agents, you experience a immediate dysfunction at the cellular level, to the extent that, literally speaking, the disruption to healthy cardiovascular function from consuming vegetable oil is worse than smoking a cigarette. Smoking a cigarette will mess up your arterial function for about 8 hours, and consuming a refined high polyunsaturated vegetable oil will mess you up for 24 hours. And they've done studies with healthy, lean, athletic college kids where they had a single serving of French fries, and they had a noticeable stiffening of the arteries and lessened, less efficient blood circulation through the cardiovascular system for a day afterward. And when you think of some of these stats and realize that Dr. Andrew Weil says that 20% of all calories in today's diet come from soybean oil. There's another estimate cited by Dr. Shanahan that 40% of all the calories that you get in a restaurant meal are from vegetable oil, because they're so calorically dense, and we fry everything in those, or we make them in their salad dressings or the things that you're putting on. So even if you have a big old salad and you have the creamy Italian dressing on the side and you pour that on, you're getting 40% of the calories from this stuff that's causing oxidative damage at the DNA level. So of course it's going to affect mood and cognitive function and lead to these widespread problems we see with depression, anxiety, strongly associated with food intake, and also making you tired so that you don't feel like getting out into the fresh air and the sunshine and doing exercise and doing things that are known to positively affect the hormones and the metabolic functions that optimize your mood and prevent depression or improve depression. So yeah, it's a hot topic these days. And then the other thing that you said was this junk food lifestyle is indicative of a lack of discipline and a lack of commitment or prioritization to your health. And so that right there, just you don't care enough to establish standards, because I say most people know that when they stop at the French fry place and go in and get, they get a sundae at McDonald's and a hamburger and fries, and I'll have a salad now too, because McDonald's is seeing the writing on the wall and trying to make money off you, so they'll throw the salad in there. But when we make these choices that provide instant gratification at the expense of our long-term health, and we know it 99.5% of the time, sometimes we don't know it, and that percentage of the population would love to educate them to say, hey, fruits and vegetables are important and you can't live on bread alone, that kind of thing. But for most of us, we make these decisions knowing full well how they adversely impact our health, and we still do them. So what does that say about every other thing that you're trying to do and aspiring to be in life, whether it's a parent or get through the shift at the office, or have some sort of goal to live a healthy, happy life? It really gets in the way if you can't even hit that low-hanging fruit that's eating a clean, nutritious diet.
Yeah, absolutely. So how did you get involved in because did you have a similar story and journey like Mark Sisson and myself, and I'm sure every person who was eating the wrong way because they were fed the wrong information? Did you have the same health issues because you're eating the wrong way as you got older, and was that kind of the the moment in your life when you're like, okay, something's wrong? Or what research initially sparked this interest in saying, hey, maybe this is wrong, the way we've been eating, the way we've been carb loading? Because most athletes like yourself thought that carbs is the best source of fuel, so let me consume as much carbs as possible because I'm going to burn it off anyways. And when did you have that transition where you learned that, okay, you can burn fat as a primary energy source?
Yeah, good question, man. I got to admit, I was not one of those people that was, near death with my PowerPoint presentation showing this fat guy that was on blood drugs and things. But it is interesting to see that many of the leaders in the movement, the alternative health movement, ancestral health movement, came from this place of pain and suffering. And they have so much passion and so much intensity to learn and to turn things around, to share this message of enlightenment and empowerment, how they turn the health around. So it's kind of cool to see where these people have come from, and you have so much respect for someone that can go from. One of our Primal Health coaches, Tom, sent me a couple pictures the other day. Here's one at 405 pounds, and here's present day at $1.79 in a health food store, holding up his vitamins or whatever he's doing. And just the visual understanding of what that individual has been through and what he's done to turn his life around is so powerful that if you welcomed him up on stage, he'd get a standing ovation and start talking, and everyone would listen no matter what he said. So I'm not one of those guys, but as you know, or maybe the listeners know, I'm a former professional triathlete. I was a world-ranked tri guy who raced for 9 years on the circuit and was national champion, number 3 ranked in the world in 1991. So I was at the highest level of athletic performance and trying to optimize every single thing in my life to be the best that I could be, whether that was sleep or diet. And of course, back then, we didn't know any better. So I was eating those healthy carbohydrates like the whole grains and trying to stay away from sugar and junk food and all that stuff. So I've had this commitment to healthy eating for a long time, but then, abruptly changed course in recent years. This is now exactly 10 years ago this month, when Mark and I sat down and he brought me into the Primal Blueprint fold, and we started working on the book together and building this movement and this lifestyle. But that was my first exposure to ancestral health. And I parted ways at the door, and he's like, and I'm like, okay, so no grains and no sugar. So what about oatmeal? He's like, dude, that's a grain. I'm like, what about brown rice? How do we reconcile this with what we've been taught our whole life? So, I went on this cold turkey journey over into the primal living strategy, and I did experience a noticeable improvement in conditions like gas, bloating, discomfort after meals, afternoon blues. I was already kind of a pretty fit, old-time guy, no complaints. I'm 43 years old, 10 years ago, and, recently removed from big-time triathlon scene, and I was still capable of riding my bike for a few hours and running out in the canyon, but I wasn't really a fit person. I was very narrowly suited for cardiovascular activity based on my background as a triathlete, but if you asked me to do like 12 pull-ups, I actually considered that a workout and wrote it down in my little journal. Like, today I did 12 pull-ups. follow-up. So I did a strength training session, and I was completely sorry ass. And then I started to have these health problems, like I tore my meniscus randomly with no known attribution, which commonly happens. I Googled it, and it says males around the age of 40 commonly tear their meniscus with no known attribution. And I was walking my dog on the street, and all of a sudden I couldn't bend my leg. And I'm like, this is bullshit. This sucks. I don't want, I can see this lifestyle playing out where, yeah, I can get on my bike and pedal, or you see these old time joggers where they're hunched over and they're shuffling along with terrible form, and at least they're out the door, so all the power to them. But I aspired to not succumb to the aging process, so I also embraced that primal principle of the fitness side. So not only the eating, but with Mark's inspiration, he's like, man, you got to sprint, you got to get those, get over to the track and open up the throttle once in a while, because the last time I had a sprint was my last race on the pro circuit, and that was a long time ago. So I started sprinting. I started doing strength training and putting my body under load and lifting heavy weights. Well, heavy, I'll call them heavy, but anyone listening who's been in the gym knows that squatting 145 is not that heavy, but to me it was. But I started to integrate all these other lifestyle elements. That's what the Primal Blueprint is all about. It's not just a diet. So that was the awakening for me, was to kind of turn the corner from old-time burnt-out endurance athlete who still ate a lot of brown rice and had a gel or two on his weekend bike rides, to this entirely new awakening where you're fasting and you're doing sprinting and you're going into the gym and slamming it really hard for 20 minutes like you've never done before, and then building competency in all these different areas. So that's kind of my background. My story is coming from that extreme endurance challenge, and not only all the positive benefits of Primal, but also to recognize at this point and mention that when I was a professional triathlete and at the top of my game, I was a very, very fit guy. I could go 146 for an Olympic distance race, but I was extremely unhealthy on many, many categories. Not body composition. I had my six-pack and I had muscles going here and there, but it was a time of my life where I accelerated the aging process. I had all kinds of illness, injury, burnout, constantly battling and managing, to where I would not at all call myself a healthy person. I was sleeping, training, and eating. And if you asked me, if the neighbor came over and asked me to move a few sandbags because the rainstorm was coming, I'm like, sorry, man, those are too heavy. I was just this narrowly suited creature that could get out in the water, swim, bike, and run. And that was really about it.
Yeah, see, that's really important, because that's that's something that we don't really think about. You look at somebody who was ranked third, ranked third. I mean, that's fun. That's crazy to think about. That how many people do triathlons, and the fact that you're ranked third is just mind-boggling. And to think that
Ricky, that's like the guys on the airplane would ask me, I'd be flying home from Chicago, the biggest race in the world. There's like 7,000 or 8,000 participants, and they're like, well, how did you do? And I'm like, I got fourth today, and I'm flying back to California. And they're like, well, how many people were in there? And I'm like, 7,000. You got fourth out of 7,000? And I'm thinking in my head, like, dang, I should have caught that Australian dude in the last mile, but I didn't have the kick today. But most of these people are like recreational participants, so when you're on the pro circuit, your perspective changes a little bit. But you want to play that, trump that up right now. That's fine, because it was so long ago. I adhere to the motto now that the older I get, the faster I was.
Well, yeah, the story, the story is always better than the reality, right? Like, as time goes by, you always modify it a little bit and sexy it up a little bit, but nothing wrong. Hey, that's still super impressive. And so even when you were ranked third at your peak, do you think, would you consider yourself unhealthy at that time?
Oh, sure. Because for example, my left calf muscle, after every single race on the circuit where we'd run, I was on the Olympic distance circuit, so it was swim a mile, bike 25, and run 6 mile. The Ironman was a different deal, and that's, you don't do that more than once a year. So these were very high-speed events where you're riding as fast as you can, you're swimming as fast as you can, and then you get off and you're running 5-minute miles and maybe sprinting around the corner for the last half a mile. And so for the next 2 or 3 days, I could barely walk, and my plantar fasciitis was extremely severely painful almost every day of my life, to the point where I'd wake up in the morning and the first thing I'd do would be to hop over to my jacuzzi, stick my foot in, and roll it around in the jets before I could even put weight on my foot. And here's like, I'm a ranked guy who's getting magazine coverage for how am I going to do in the next race. And here's my picture and all these things are great. And I got sponsors and I'm wheeling and dealing and traveling across the world. But I consider that a very unhealthy type of existence where the injuries and all those extreme parts of the equation were, nothing except for compromising my health. And then the fatigue level of like flying on a jet that many miles around the world and, racing like in the Caribbean where you're in this tropical heat and you're asked to sprint that last mile. I think that has a lasting damaging effect on the body. It's just too much. And all the old time athletes now, unfortunately, quite a few of them are coming up with heart problems, which could be directly attributed to that overuse factor of inflaming and scarring the lines of the heart because you're pegging it at 160 beats per minute for hours and hours every single day on those long rides and those long swim workouts and years of that type of abuse to the heart. It's just like doing too many bicep curls and you kind of shred your muscle fibers and your biceps aching and you got to get a surgery on the tendon or whatever. When you do that to your heart, it's really bad news. And now what we're seeing is a very common occurrence of atrial fibrillation in these very high level, extremely fit athletes. And it's a tough one. Hopefully we can awaken to it and realize to manage that stress. And, looking back, if I had anything to change, I would have slowed down, trained less intensely, gotten over myself, the name of my new podcast. So it's really has a strong association to me that I took myself so seriously and was so competitive and driven and type AAA that it cost me some performance and it cost me some enjoyment, where if I had just relaxed and done the best I could and aspired to this evolved mindset where I wasn't the center of the universe and I could have a little perspective when I got my butt kicked and not get discouraged and rather just refocus and problem solve in a non-emotional manner. All those things are what I like to talk about today more than anything when I'm talking to athletes, is not the technical logistics, but to say, relax, take a deep breath, realize this race isn't the end all. Don't snap at your partner when they're carrying your bag to the starting line. Where are my socks? And you see all this kind of extreme behavior from athletes who get so wrapped up because they're competitive, driven people anyway. So we need to all tone that down in society, and we're looking at great benefit if we can do so.
But isn't that what maybe gave you the edge at times, was that using emotion as a fuel for energy, as tapping into your adrenaline levels and just getting yourself fired up? I mean, you see it. I play basketball, and I play with guys who play better when they're upset, and I play better, and I play ball with guys who play worse when they're upset. That their ego gets in the way. Where they end up making a foolish, to take a foolish drive to the hoop because a guy was talking shit to him. So now he wants to prove that he can score on him instead of making the pass to the open guy. And then you have other guys that just use it as a fuel, and you're like, well, he's mad, so he's going to play some good defense and he's going to play physical. So it's weird, because isn't that what sometimes makes an athlete a athlete? Is that ability to take it maybe more seriously than the next guy and be upset? Because you hear about great players like Jordan, Kobe, in all sports, Tom Brady. These guys are so obsessive with winning and getting better that it drives them, and that can you balance out the okay, how do I constantly motivate myself daily to make the sacrifices needed to train as hard as I need to? And that's another thing I want to get into too, is that myth about when are you overtraining and when, because it was always that thing, right? Like, stop being a wuss, you go till failure, you do one more, and that's when you're training hard. And apparently that was possibly a myth too, and you could be doing more harm than good. So my first question, as an athlete, do you think that you could be as successful as you were without having that hating to lose? Because that's one thing that drives me. I don't mind, when you win, you're like, yeah, I won. But when you lose, you're upset about it, and it motivates you to want to get better. At least for me and for many athletes. Do you think that you could be as good as you were if you didn't have that motivation?
Oh, Ricky, that's the ultimate question. It's so important. So I think the listeners, we should slow down. If you're listening at 1.5 speed, put it down to 1.0 speed, because this is the key, man. This is the ultimate question for that competitor, is how do you harness that competitive intensity and be the best that you can be, but also get over yourself and have kind of that balanced perspective where you're a nice person to live with the night before the big game, or, you get off the basketball court without getting in a fight. And I loved playing adult basketball until that point came where guys could not manage their competitive intensity, and I felt like they were going to hurt me because I just picked them clean off the dribble at midcourt and went in for a layup, and the guy's jumping up to block me while I'm in the air and coming down, and we're having words, and I'm like, my words are, dude, we're in the D1 league in a small town. There's the A league, for those of you familiar with adult basketball. There's the A league of like former college ballers and the 6'7" guys showing up. Then there's the B league. Then there's the C league. And then there's the D league. So don't jump up in the air and try to block my shot when you're going to undercut me and I'm going to fall onto a hard floor, or I will kick your ass somehow, even though you're 3 inches taller than me and 25 pounds. So that part, it's like we want to manage that competitive intensity to where we have a great time and exhibit good sportsmanship. And I know, my 14-year-old son's in the corner at the time watching the game. Am I going to get into it and push a guy in the shoulders? Because no, we're going to have a friendly adult conversation and set an example for the youth that are watching. So you have to keep your wits about you. And I see a lot of times people lose that. And that's the basketball example. In the endurance scene, the way people lose their cool is that overtraining. So that kind of takes you to the other part of your question. But to answer, I feel like the magic is in giving it your all and being all in with your commitment and your passion for competing and trying as hard as you can and going till the last whistle or to the finish line without any question of self-doubt or these things that get in the way or these excuses that we manufacture in our mind as we're running the last 6 miles of the marathon. Roger Bannister, the great first sub-4-minute miler, he's deceased this year, and he left us with the most incredible treasure trove of quotes. You can look him up on the internet, Roger Bannister quotes. And one of the things he said was the essence of running, so you can fill in basketball or whatever your competitive aspirations are, the essence of running is while you're doing it, nothing else matters in the world. You're going at it with full intensity, and you're the highest level of commitment and dedication. But when it's over, you put it away generally in a place that's not very important. And the quote stuck with me. I read it many years ago, and now I'm thinking about, my triathlon results from my 9-year career reside in a brown manila folder, dark brown, not light brown, special color. It says race results, and it's in the very back of my file cabinet. And I can pull it out and say, oh, look at my times in Phoenix in the year 1991 where I had such a great swim. All that stuff meant everything to me at that time. And that day when I was on the starting line in Phoenix, I wanted to win more than anybody, and I was willing to do whatever it took. But as soon as the race is over, you get up and you go on with your day. The great New Age author Dan Millman says that you should live your life like you're watching a fantastic movie. And when you're watching a truly fantastic movie, Schindler's List or whatever, the tearjerker or the things that really bring out the emotion and win the Academy Awards, you're all consumed with the movie. You're shedding tears at the proper time, or you're feeling the fear and the energy of Tom Cruise as he's trying to get away in Mission Impossible. But as soon as the credits go up, you get up and you walk out and you go get your car and you go get something to eat. So you go on with your life even though you're entirely consumed in that movie. And so if your next basketball game, if you think about it that way, like, hey, this might as well be the NBA Championships Game 7 for me because it's our season-ending game, and if we beat these guys, we get third place in the D League, and that can have tremendous importance to you. And I love to live my life that way. We were talking about off the air my latest competitive passion of speed golf, and so now I'm doing this goofy stuff where I'm running really fast around the golf course and trying to make a good score and also make a good time. And this stuff is just as important to me and just as rewarding as crossing the finish line in a big race years ago where there's 4,000 people watching and the TV cameras are filming for ESPN, and it it seems like a big deal in life, but it's only, it's what you make of it. And so these personal challenges that I hold into my later years, done racing on the circuit, are just as rewarding because I'm all in and all consumed by it when I'm doing it. But of course, I'm not training 6 hours a day or having it overtake my life in that way. It's just fun, and it's in the proper perspective at all times.
Yeah.
Oh, and then the other question was about the overtraining. So I think it's pretty easy, man. I think if you're a novice, and I've coached so many people who say, well, I'm just starting this sport, so I don't really know how to train myself and whether I'm doing too much or too little. We all know we have a little voice inside our head, I call it the intuition, that applies critical thinking as well as instinct. So it's not just, hey, train how you feel, because you might feel pumped up today because you're pissed because your friend beat you yesterday and embarrassed you in front of your girlfriend when the three of you were riding. So all these emotions are flowing and you're like, let's go, I'm going to get him today. So you have to reason with these animal instincts and say, wow, I've been going straight for 6 weeks. I feel fantastic today, but it really is time to back off. So I'm going to be a higher level reasoning human and apply strategy rather than just this raw, basic competitive instinct. So that's what I call intuition, and how to make good training decisions, weighing in all these different variables. Another great example I like to give to athletes is when you have a slight tickle in your throat, that first beginning of the sore throat, right? We all know what that is and how that plays out. That's the first sign of a cold. Then you start sniffling, then you start feeling heady and full in the head and tired. And a lot of times we push through that so we can go get work today and get everyone else sick in the office when we're most contagious. And then we go do our workout because we think, oh, if we get a good sweat up, maybe we'll sweat that cold out. And it's complete nonsense. If your body's showing any sign of immune disturbance, even a slight immune disturbance, there is no justification whatsoever to do a workout of any level of strain. So even your routine 5-mile run or whatever your basic thing is, I'm not saying kill yourself, but when I first got those sore throats, it took me many, many years to learn this. I would pull the plug on my life and I'd stay in bed and rest and read and watch TV. Of course, I was a pro athlete, so I had that luxury. I know not everyone can relate exactly to that. But when you get a little sore throat, you would be very well served to cease exercising entirely, except for walking around the block with your dog at night and doing that basic movement, which is not strenuous, until your immune function at rest shows signs of being normal, until your energy level at rest shows signs of being normal. And we ignore these common sense principles so often because of our competitive instinct and our ego getting in the way and saying, oh, you know, I don't want to take a day off exercise or I'll feel guilty. I'll feel like not an accomplished person. So we need to turn off the ego voice and just go with the flow and kind of take what our body gives us each day and nothing more. Just see what you got. Go ahead and put out the effort, but be very careful not to discount the knowledge and the wisdom of the body.
But don't you think that there's a little bit of benefit in, for example, today I go to the gym before I go to work, and so I try to be at the gym at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I have two kids, and I've never done this. I was always I always worked out late at night, but after I have a 3-year-old and a 1.5-year-old, and it got in the way of me seeing them. I'd come home and I'd feel guilty because I just got home from work, and I'm like, hey, how's everybody? Okay, bye. I got to go to the gym real quick. Yeah. And I felt guilty. So I'm like, I can't stop going to the gym. I've been doing it since I was a teenager. I'm like, it's a part of my life. I have to continue doing it. So I'm going to have to do it earlier in the day. So that way, when I come home, it's family time, or if I have some chores to do, or if I have some things to do, the gym isn't one extra thing that gets in the way of seeing them. So I started doing that. And there's days in the morning where, the morning comes quick. My daughter wakes up in the middle of the night a few times, like last night, and my son wanted me to go sleep in his bed, so he wakes me up. So I had a crappy sleep. I had 5.5, 6 hours of crappy sleep, disturbed sleep. And I woke up this morning and I'm like, maybe I should just sleep in an extra hour and not go to the gym. And I'm like, you know what? Stop being a wuss and just go to the gym. It's like, stop, just get it, and it's always this thing where it's just like, okay, and I've heard you, I've heard Mark, I've heard so many people talk about this, and the importance of rest and not overtraining, and I'm probably doing myself some harm going to the gym when my body's not getting enough rest. And then I'm after this podcast, I'm playing basketball, so that's only going to hurt more too. And what I do is I feel like that giving myself that hurdle to go over in the long run, it gives me some benefit. And because I feel like some people who are lazy, for example, and we make 1,000 excuses for everything. We procrastinate about everything. Like, I'm so afraid of going down that road, right? Because it's so easy to justify, like, okay, well, today I have that little scratch in my throat, that thing that Brad talked about, so I'm not going to go to the gym. I'm getting sick, right? So then tomorrow it's like, well, my daughter woke me up, I didn't get enough sleep, so I'm not going to the gym today either. And then you go down that road, right, where you constantly start, just making excuses. And as a athlete, I think that one thing that you learn, like, when I was first got into working out, I'm Portuguese, so I grew up playing soccer. Then I got into skateboarding, this and that. But I really got into weightlifting in my teens and early 20s. And I love the discipline I learned from sports and from weightlifting. I eat things because I know it's good for me, or at the time I thought it was good for me. I don't care if it tastes good or not. I have this mental strength of being able to just do what I think is best for me. It doesn't matter if it's hard. It doesn't matter if it tastes good. It doesn't matter if I'm tired and I don't feel like training. And I feel like we learn something from that, right? I'm sure you take something away from the fact that, like, there was days you were tired and you pushed yourself through it, and you have that discipline to do so. So when you do get into a situation in life where you don't have the luxury of choosing, hey, do I want to go to the gym or not? When you get into a situation where you have to do something that you don't feel like doing, you've taught yourself to fight through it and deal with struggle. And I think, isn't that something that you can take from that, where maybe it's not always I guess good advice to just say, hey, when you don't feel like doing something or your body feels tired, don't do it. Like, maybe it's good sometimes to fight through that and learn how to deal with struggle, to deal with all the discipline that you learn from just doing things you don't feel like doing, and doing something that's hard, and not always taking the path of least resistance.
Yeah, that's well said, man. I love how you bring up these dilemmas, right? And there's so much to be said for habits and momentum, to the extent that you are kind of on autopilot with this highly functioning, disciplined, productive, healthy, fit life. So, the idea of getting up at 5 a.m. and going to the gym is not a big deal to you. It's just routine, and you do it and you get there. And some days you have a fantastic workout. Some days you have a medium workout. Some days you have a below par workout. But it's okay, and it's just part of the rhythm of life. And it's just like, brushing your teeth or combing your hair. You don't need to get motivated or have this big decision making, like, should I comb my hair today, or is my right arm too tired? So if you put, like, health and fitness practices into that category, of course, that's super positive. One thing I'll say is, like, you want to align the difficulty of your workouts, the degree of difficulty, with your 1 through 10 score on energy level, motivation, and health at that particular time. So if you're waking up and last night was rough with the kids, and so you kind of feel like a 5 or a 4 instead of an 8 or a 9 with your energy, and therefore you kind of feel like a 5 or a 4 with your motivation level, you're going to go into the gym, and ideally you would put up a 4 or a 5 workout, not a 10. Even though we know that we always can. And I bring this example up a lot to athletes, is if I came over to your house this morning and put a gun to your head, you're going to do the best strength training session you've had in 3 years. And it's going to be incredible, even though you got 5 hours of sleep and your left arm was a little sore from last week's basketball game. So we're always able to rise to the occasion and dig deep and stimulate that fight or flight response and do these magnificent performances. But if we abuse that over and over every single day a little bit, by getting up and going to the gym tomorrow and the next day, even though your sleep is compromised over and over during this sensitive time in life, that's going to dig you an overtraining hole, guaranteed. And so if you're in that category of highly motivated, goal-oriented, fit person who has all these wonderful habits and momentum build, then I'm going to say, be that guy that aligns your workouts with your subjective health scores, because you're mostly going to be a 7 or 8 kind of guy. You're going to do a lot of 7 or 8 workouts, and you're not going to have those lulls where you feel like crap for 3 weeks straight. But then there's another category of human who has not established a lot of momentum or healthy habits, and they probably need to get up off their ass and get into the gym and do something to, to build some momentum, some confidence, some habit forming. But I want to make it easy for them too, and say, look, if you can commit to a 5 to 10 minute walk every evening after dinner and start there, can you do that? Yes or no? Oh, of course. Of course I have 10 minutes. I can watch the rest of my shows after. If they're locked into these horrible habit patterns where their whole night's on digital entertainment, you want to break free from some of that momentum. And then it's so easy that, that can lock in to the extent that maybe they'll start putting up 30-minute walks as time goes on because they enjoy it. And it's, if you're going to get your shoes on and go outside and leash up the dog, you might as well make it a little more productive. So I don't see it as too big of a problem to have to back off at those times when you feel, below or 3 or 4 motivation. You just bail. And sometimes, in my case, many times, that would happen after I got dressed, put on the helmet, clipped into my pedals, started pedaling down the road. My mind's not right. I might be stressed about the latest sponsor deal that blew up, and I'm in an angry, frustrated state of mind. My legs feel a little heavy. My lower back is stiff. Something's off, and I'm pedaling down the road, getting into this kind of spiral of not feeling like doing a good workout that day. So I'll make a commitment, and I'll revise my commitment and say, you know what, I'm just going to pedal around. I'm going to go to the post office, get my mail, and come back. And that's my day to day. And I feel very congruent with that decision. I don't feel like a lazy ass because I bailed on what was written by my coach on the board. And I think we make that mistake a lot of times too, where we hear the voice saying, "You're not enough. You suck if you go against your commitment, and your personal trainer's waiting at the gym for you." Text the dude or the gal and say, "Hey, I can't make it today. I got to take care of a sick kid," or whatever it is, right? So there's always ways to renegotiate and be congruent with the decisions that you make are aligned with your long-term values and beliefs and higher goals. And that's, wow. I mean, I just described what is it like to be at the highest level of sophistication as an athlete. And what I learned on the pro circuit, man, I'll tell you, the first 4 or 5 years, it was all about who can work the hardest, who's the toughest mofo when you get down in the heat and you put your shoes on and it's 88 degrees with 90% humidity. Can you hold pace or can you not? And if you can't, you're a wimp and you're going home and you're not making it on the pro circuit. But at a certain point, then the smoke clears and you got the top 25 guys in the world, let's say, and they're all equally talented. And they're all equally driven and focused, and they have optimal lifestyle circumstances where they have their ice baths and their massages and the right coaching and all that. And then what does it take? How do you get from this level to a next level to the next level, and then to battling against the very best guys pushing the absolute limits of human endurance? And you get there by being smart and intuitive and strategic. And I have great examples of, like, Mark Allen, the greatest triathlete of all time. There's a big run in San Diego called the Tuesday Run, and there's like maybe 70 to 90 guys on this crazy cross-country 12-mile run where they're racing through the forest, and it's a very, very aggressive pace with the best guys up in front. And I remember doing this thing and barely hanging on and coming to the parking lot and finishing this 12-mile run and feeling great and stretching and talking and drinking and refueling. And then I look down the road and there's a single solitary figure coming way behind the last guy to finish the whole thing. And he's coming closer and closer and closer. And who is it? It's Mark Allen. And he's 10 minutes behind the slowest guy on this entire run, obviously not in the lead pack like he usually is. And he comes into the parking lot and I'm like, "Hey, dude, what's the story today?" And he's like, "Oh, I overslept." So here's the number one athlete in the world who's getting paid a nice salary from Nike head to toe to represent the swoosh and go around the world and kick ass and win the Hawaii Ironman 6 times and win the world championships in these 10 times. And he overslept on the most important and competitive run of the week in the training hotbed of San Diego, where the best athletes in the world congregate in the winter. What's up with that? And what's up with that is he wasn't feeling it that day to be the guy in the front of the pack. So whether he overslept because he overslept or overslept because he, just knew somewhere in his mind that it wasn't that day to get up and race, I thought that was the most beautiful example. It's like if the number one guy can slack off a little bit, or if you're in adult basketball and you sub out and you raise your hand more than you usually do because you're the Iron Man who skips segments because the other guys are too tired, and you sit down and take a breather, oh my gosh, that's when you're progressing as an athlete beyond this rudimentary beast that just knows how to turn on the gas pedal, because that will not get you to the highest level, especially in a very difficult sport like endurance, or even in adult basketball. That's going to get you with a bad knee because you're going to tape it up and push through it instead of miss one game. Boo-hoo if we miss you for one game, and then heal yourself and go get the right therapy.
Yeah, I've done that quite a few times, and I'm sure you've done it in the past where you're injured and then you come back a little too soon because you're like, oh, I'll just go fight through this. I'll just wear a knee brace or whatnot. I mean, I fractured both elbows at the same time, and if I do heavy, playing basketball, it was like a freak accident, and if I do heavy bench press or any type of tricep exercises, that knee or that elbow pain comes back, and it always comes back when I go heavy. And now I'm kind of at a happier place because I think when you're talking about just understanding that when that game ends, it's over, and you're okay with the way you played or what happened or whatnot, and don't let your emotions kind of control you. Use it as a motivator if you can, but don't let it, because I mean, really, you're a father, I'm a father. The only difference between adults and children is that when our emotions are all over the place, we should have some self-control to not let it affect us. And children lose their mind. They have my son had a meltdown yesterday because he wanted my wife to drive her car, not me, because I can only drive my car and she can only drive her car, and
that's the rules, man.
Yeah, that's the rules, and apparently I didn't know them, and he lost his mind. So it's it's hilarious. But it's one of those things where you just you have to learn that, hey, this isn't the most important thing. And even growing up, like getting more into like doing this podcast and just doing so much research in history and geopolitics and the lies we've been told about the way we're eating and all this stuff and how to manage and prevent disease with dietary methods. There's all these really what I feel are very important topics and interesting things that sports kind of lost their significance, and it kind of sucks because in a way sometimes I feel like I can't enjoy sports as much as I used to because becoming a father, all these things that happened in my life that kind of you realize how not important it was that maybe I missed that game winner 3 in the finals of a men's league. It's like it's not really that important. I come home, my kids still love me. There's still people who are dealing with serious struggles daily, either because of the way they eat or diseases caused by the lack of good information to whatever it may be. But there's bigger issues in the world, and it's hard to be content sometimes as an athlete because you feel like that's what's been a motivator for so long. That's always been a motivator, and it's like I'm never content, and that pushes you through injuries. It pushes you through days that you're tired, and but I think there's also a sense of peace in being content, and I think that's really important, and I think that's something you hit on. And I think it's a really important point that probably isn't talked about enough when talking about training, because everybody, a lot of these podcasts, when you're talking about health, nutrition, I mean, a lot of times, including myself, I'm listening to interviews with you or you interviewing somebody else because I'm trying to get tips on how to get my peak performance, on how I can push myself to the next level. And it's constantly trying to get more, and then when you don't get there, you get discouraged, you get unmotivated, you get upset, and I think that it's sometimes like that example used on the guy who probably followed you too hard on a drive. It could be because he was having a rough day because he wasn't playing well and he took it out on you. And I think that there's something really important about finding internal peace. And usually when I play sports and I see people who are either juicing up at the gym and they got huge in 3 months or they're at the basketball court and they're getting in fights with people all the time. I always think it's an internal issue. It's like that person is not content with the way they look, and they constantly are trying to solve that issue, and they're never going to be happy because they're looking for happiness in the wrong place. Or this person on the basketball court who's upset and getting in fights with everybody, it's not basketball that's causing him to be upset. It's some internal issue. It's some personal things that maybe he's not getting enough love at home. He's not getting, maybe he's had a tough, maybe he works at a job where his boss is a jerk, or maybe he's having some issues with the wife or whatever, and then he's taking it out on everybody else. So I think that, it's really important to sometimes just being content and being grateful for what you have accomplished, for being grateful for what you can do. And nothing reminds me of this more than when I see there's people who go to my gym who have people in wheelchairs. There's this guy in a wheelchair goes to my gym. Who every time I see him, I'm like, how fucking lucky am I that I can just walk? Like, that I can just get dressed in the morning without help. Like, all these little things, and yet, like, I'll be pissed because I'm not leg pressing like I was last week. It's like, and this guy, is in here, and he's doing the best he can, and he has to deal with daily struggles that I couldn't imagine. And so I think that it is really important, not to make this podcast all sad and depressing, but I think these are important messages, because I think as athletes we get so caught up in this competitive nature that we do forget that sometimes we should just stop and then just enjoy the fact that we can be athletes at all and play these sports, and remember that we do it because, or we should do it in many cases, because it's a way of getting away from everyday life. Hopefully I go to basketball tonight, and there's not too much fighting, and I get to just enjoy the competitive part of it. I get to enjoy the beautiful part of it, of strategizing and the cuts and whatnot, and I can just use it as a gateway from everyday stresses, and not use it as adding to the stress of life, and I think that's what, like you said, I think that's something that we should use sports, and the same way people use yoga, the same way people use, if you're a carpenter and you're focused on your one task, and it kind of gets you away from everyday stresses, like just have that getaway from everyday stresses, and I think that's really important.
Well said, man. We got you wound up. You go off, and it's a beautiful thing. And I think we all have these examples of these winners, these incredible champions. They may not be well-balanced, well-adjusted people, and we have to remember that. So Michael Jordan was the most competitive guy, and he had to win. It's like, yeah, you know what? I'm not impressed, man. I like his game, but I don't need to raise these people onto pedestals that they're better than everyone else just because they win.
And what did you always hear about Michael Jordan? That he was a jerk, right? I've never heard.
That's what you hear. Yeah, I'm not picking on him. I'm just making the example. Like Brady, I'll pick on him because, like, here's this guy is the greatest quarterback. His TB12 method is a cool book that shows how he's kept healthy and fit, and has good priorities and all that. But he let the air out of bloody footballs, mate. I mean, come on. He let the air out of his team's footballs, but not the opposing team. A lot of people don't realize, like, the teams use different balls. So he was, gaining an unfair advantage over the opponent, who they kicked butt on anyway. It was the Colts. They won like 58-10 or something. But the fact that he was able to cross that line, and the Patriots are secretly filming the practice and stealing the signs of the other team.
I live in Massachusetts, Brad. How dare you?
I know. You Massachusetts listeners, listen up. Same with Red Auerbach, putting on cold showers and the opposing team, or blasting the Heat at halftime. And that's all funny. We laugh. But, to me, deep down, like, one of the things I enjoyed most about my experience as an elite athlete was the camaraderie and the shared experience of being able to race these guys to the death up and down the mountain passes. But at the same time, as soon as we're done, we're sitting by the pool laughing and joking and, empathizing with somebody who's having a tough time. Or, I remember I actually won, was it 3 races by disqualification. In other words, I got second on 3 separate occasions where the winner was booted for drafting, unfairly drafting on the bicycle or going off course or whatever the reason was. And, I felt so bad for those guys. I still counted it as a win because the rules are rules and they got disqualified, but it didn't feel the same to me as being able to cross the finish line first. And so, these comments like, by any means necessary, I'm going to knock out my opponent. It's like, oh my gosh, we're talking about the era of doping and cheating and scandals, and it's really important to pull back a little bit and get some perspective. One guy I really like is Usain Bolt, because he's out there having fun and smiling and laughing and joking and living that quintessential Jamaican lifestyle where he's out at the dance clubs in the off season. And then you read his autobiography and he says, yeah, I was really lazy in training. My coach was constantly giving me a hard time because I'd cut out halfway when the workout was done. And all this kind of characterizations that he's lazy and he would be great if he was more focused. But wait a minute. He's the fastest human that has ever lived on the planet Earth. He is, in my estimation, we will see nothing like him ever again in our lifetime. And we've probably seen the greatest things I've ever seen in my life are Tiger Woods dominating golf at that level and Usain Bolt winning again and again in the 100-meter sprint, which is the most competitive athletic event on the planet, because you don't need to be on a golf team. You don't need to be in the NFL or make the cut or get drafted. They line up people in every country, and every child on this planet at some point or another runs in a foot race, and they identify the fast kids and they do something with them, whether they come from Nigeria or United States of America or Great Britain or Sweden, Jamaica, wherever they find them. And so if this guy's lazy and loosey-goosey and unfocused and all that, but he's performed at the highest standard that we've ever seen in the history, maybe we should sit back and think, wow, maybe this guy has the secret, and all those super focused and intense coaches in the NCAA track system where they're getting these freshmen who are high school All-Americans, and then they're pulling their hamstring and they're out for their freshman season. Those are the guys that are totally messing it up. And boy, it's a nice recalibration to think that even the guys at the very top can be well adjusted, not too stuck on themselves, and compare and contrast versus the example of an athlete who blatantly cheats, like our great hero. Sorry, man. I mean, I love him, and I saw the last Super Bowl where he just had so much grit and resilience, but I would have loved if he had apologized and said, wow, I was really stupid, and I admit it, and I accept my penalty, and I'll sit out the season. We'll forfeit the Super Bowl. That was my suggestion. I'm sorry, New Englanders. That's just the way it goes here. But if he had said that, I would hold him in the highest regard now. But instead, he files a lawsuit and destroys a cell phone and denies and denies and denies. So I kind of put him in that category of he has some maturing and growing up to do to be a true athletic hero and role model. Wow, did I go off on a rant or what, Ricky? Sorry about that, man. Here we are. Usain Bolt, props, major props. Let's keep it positive, right?
We're taking turns here going on rants. I'm usually the only one who goes on them, so I'm glad that you're joining the fun, and I'm not the only one who goes on them. But yeah, no, I completely agree. I think the thing is, and again, I'm not a huge football fan, but I support all the New England teams. I watch the Bruins, I watch the Red Sox, I watch the Patriots. I'm Celtics. I'm probably a bigger Celtics fan than anything. But the thing I love about MMA, like you were saying, like after the end of a fight, they shake hands, they respect each other, and I'm a big MMA fan, and I love that, and I love the fact that like you left it all out in the you left it on the mat, and now you shake hands and you respect each other, and you realize that okay, it's just a competition, it was just a fight, it's not the end all be all. And I think we have an issue with putting these, like you said, putting these athletes on a pedestal where we think they're superhuman, or we think they're more important than other people just because they're really good at this one thing. And I think that just because you're Michael Jordan or you're Kobe Bryant or you're LeBron James and you're the best at what you do, it doesn't mean the other things in your life, like who you are, like your character, your how respectful you are, what do you do for the community, like all these other things aren't equally as important. And because these sports are so so big. And I think that, I have my own theory on why I think sports are so popular. I think because we live, this goes back to the beginning of this conversation. I think that we have this issue where people work jobs they dislike, they eat shitty food that only helps make them feel like crap and more unhappy. We've completely created a culture in society where life is about material things, and it's about consuming as many material things as possible. And we put people who are financially successful on this pedestal. We put athletes who are financially successful and famous on this pedestal. So we reward people as a culture by giving them fame and looking up to them for things that aren't really that important, when really we should be rewarding. I think it was Graham Hancock who during the interview said something like, I think one of the problems with society is that we judge people based on what type of car they drive and not how many rides they've given with that car. And it's a very it's a very simple quote, but it kind of makes the point that I was trying to make. And that, I think that's a huge issue. And I think even with athletes, it's the same thing. It's like, I'm surrounded by Tom Brady fans, and I hear them defend him. I hear them argue with him. And Tom Brady, from my perspective, he seems like obviously there's instances where like Deflategate, but even that I think was ridiculous. That sports are so popular that it was on CNN. It was like breaking news and all this stuff. It's like it was just a football.
No
game.
one got hurt. That's a good point. Like, let's remember.
We have a civil war going on in Syria. We have drones bombing in Yemen. We have proxy wars going on all over the world, and yet we're talking about sports. And it's like, at the end of the day, how important was it? Like, it wasn't that important. And as much as I love sports, I still understand that it doesn't really. The World Cup's going on right now. I was born in Portugal, so my family eats, breathes soccer. We shut down we have a small family business. We shut down for every Portugal game, and it's just, but it's fun. But at the end of the day, like, if they win or lose, it's something that's fun to get together. Fans of soccer, we get to watch this sport. We get to cheer and you root for somebody, and that's fun. But when it gets to the point where, and I love watching, rooting for my country, but when you watch fights happen, when you watch people getting beat up, when you watch or you hear about refs getting death threats, it's like, wait. Like, we have to remember it's still just a game. And the same thing as, like you were saying, as being an athlete, like, we have to remember that, like, okay, it's not the most important thing you're going to do in your life. And you might think, like, at the end of the day, Michael Jordan being a good father is going to be much more important. Him being a good role model, him being, helping the community, those things are going to have a huge impact and are going to be much more, or should be much more important than all these other things. But we kind of push that stuff aside because you're a winner, and as an athlete, that's what we try to do. I mean, Donald Trump's kind of a perfect example too of how, like, somebody put in perspective how in a lot of hip hop songs they were talking about being rich like Donald Trump. Like, it was like a cool thing. Like, you look up to these people who are really successful, but we have to put in perspective, how did they get there? And if they were doing things that weren't moral, and if they were not good people, then we shouldn't aspire to be them. We should I'd rather be somebody like, I wrote on Twitter recently, I don't envy people who have more money than me. I envy people who have more free time than me and spend more time with their family and spend more time doing the things they enjoy. That's what I envy. And but I think we've been brainwashed to believe that we have to aspire to be the best at everything, and that's the most important thing. Like, you have to be the best athlete. You're either first place or you're the first loser. So I think it's a huge issue in sports. And as an athlete, did this come with just age, kind of like understand that it's not the end of the world? Did this come with just seeing how other people handled it and being like, hey, these people are taking this shit way too seriously? Like, how did this transition happen? Because it does seem like at one point you were, very motivated, and I'm sure winning that race was the most important thing in the world. And even something like becoming a father, did that change your perspective on how important winning these tournaments and these races were?
Good question. I think it's more like I want to be honest and say that there's no reason to tone that down. Or we sometimes hear these platitudes like, again, Michael Jordan, I'm retiring to spend more time with my family. Oh, really? Because you're going to play minor league baseball. That was his initial comment, is why he was retiring from the NBA the first time. And so, it didn't take like being a father to tone down my perspective. It was really getting my ass kicked a few times when I poured my heart and soul into it and had my ego and my self-esteem lined up with the result of what I was doing. And then you go out there and you get your butt kicked and you're forced to recalibrate. You're lying in the dirt and, shaking off the dust and wondering, what more can I do to be the best that I can be? And it's so humbling and perspective altering that you can't help but get up and take yourself a little bit less seriously, because otherwise you're gonna cry yourself to sleep every night because you got 14th instead of 4th in the last race. And the people that can rise above that and get away from the storytelling and the excuse making, because that's so common, especially in the athletic world. Every ex-athlete has some story. Yeah, I was a D1 baller, and then I got to school, and then they brought in new assistant coaches, and these guys were they were looking for bangers, and I was a 3-point shooter, so I basically, and then I hurt my shoulder. Oh, okay, all right, times 800,000. Everyone's got one of those stories, and so you got to wake up and realize that you're in control of the narrative. You can make it the experience that you want. You don't need to have a story or an excuse, and you don't have to attach your self-esteem to the result. And therefore, when you free yourself from that prison of the ego, then I can be extremely competitive. I mean, I'm out there in stupid, goofy adult basketball, and I'm up in the guy's face playing as hard as I can. And if he makes a shot on me, I'll jog down the court and say, "Great shot, man, great shot." Because I don't separate that from being, a crazy competitor. And that's, I feel like that's the message that I want to convey. Same with when I talked about on the circuit. Like, we went hard. We were not, a step down from the guys who were more competitive and more driven than us. No way. I mean, it was just like focusing, not wasting energy on the ego and the ego demands. And like you talked about a long time ago on the show, those guys that get mad and play better, like John McEnroe in tennis, now the sports psychologists, the leaders in thinking and analyzing human behavior in sports, that's wasted energy, period. It is wasted energy that does not hit the ball over the net. So if you can find a way to refocus in a calming manner where you're not producing more stress hormones, but instead you're taking deep breaths and you're refocusing, that's where we're seeing today's competitors have raised it to the top level and last for 20 years in the sport and doing all those great things. These guys are on to kind of a different wavelength than that rudimentary motivators that we're familiar with in the past, where the coach yells at halftime to the team in the locker room and they come out with more intensity in the second half. That stuff is like, it's basic level, and then there's so much higher level of sophistication that it's, you can't even describe it. So hopefully we'll all get there someday, including all the youth sports coaches that are overly intense and competitive with these poor little kids who are just basically deep down just trying to have a competitive experience and learn about themselves. And instead there's all these impure elements in there. So that's another, you would get me off on another rant, but I know we're running out of time. So I think we've left the listener with a lot of cool stuff, huh?
Yeah. No, this is, it's funny because I was going to have you on to talk about keto, and that was like 18 topics ago that we just went on. But that's what I love about this conversation. I have quite a few guests that have been returning guests, and I always apologize to them because sometimes I'm like, hey, what do you want to, anything specifically you want to talk about? And I'm like, yeah, maybe we'll hit on this or maybe we'll hit on that. And then at the end of the show, I'm like, I'm so sorry we didn't talk about any of the things we said we were going to talk about. But it's one of the reasons, like, I get emails and I get people hitting me up, and they actually enjoy the fact that I interview on this show. I try to, because I'm not really good at anything besides maybe holding a conversation. It's the only thing I'm actually like really good at, and that's what I try to capture. I try to capture more of a conversation than an interview, and I hope that if I don't prevent the conversation from going down any avenue. That if we just start talking, and if you bring up something that's interesting that reminds me of a story, or if I bring up something that's interesting to you that reminds you of a story, that we might end up going down a road and talking about some really interesting stuff that we wouldn't have talked about if I forced this conversation to stay on topic all the time. So I think that's what makes it fun. It makes it casual, and for the listener, sometimes we end up talking about some of our personal journeys and opinions and philosophies, which I think sometimes is equally as important than just information heavy podcasts. So I think that there's a lot of benefit from these type of conversations. And yeah, I mean, I think being an athlete in general, it's for kids, you learn discipline, you learn that working hard pays off and all that stuff. But I definitely agree that you can't push kids too much where it's not fun. And I mean, there is this balancing act, because now you're hearing a lot of the conversations with parents talk about, like, oh, kids are too soft because every kid gets a hug, every kid gets a trophy. But don't you think that's a possible issue too, the going in reverse, where you don't push the kids at all and then you're just letting them just have fun, and it's not really representing maybe eventually when you get older, it's not representing what life is, that the skills that are really going to help you in life, that learning that, okay, if I work hard, it pays off. If I don't work hard, I don't get any results. I'll
get a trophy.
Yeah, I'll get a trophy. Like, do you think that that's an issue at all?
Oh yeah, man, that's a big one. And one of my favorite youth coaches, Ken G in Sacramento, he oversees a huge youth basketball program, the YBA Dogs. And one time I was complaining about a situation with my son and the coaching messaging or whatever was going on. I said, it was supposed to be fun. That's supposed to be the number one priority, right? And he goes, no, it's not fun. He goes, I'll tell you what's fun. Is you take the kids to the park and they fill up water balloons and they throw water balloons around, or they get a basketball in the pool in the backyard at the swim party and they play water basketball. That's fun for the kids. The point of organized sports and the $70 uniform and the travel to the other city to play in the big tournament and stay in the hotel and all that stuff that we do with high-level youth sports. He goes, the number one priority is a positive experience for the kid. And a positive experience can be getting your ass kicked over and over against better teams, and the kids are sad and they're discouraged and they're shell shocked, but it's a positive experience because it shows them, wow, there's someone better than me in 8th grade that's dunking on me when I thought I was pretty slick, able to hit some threes and drive to the hoop. So I never forgot that positive experience should be the number one priority, and there's plenty of opportunities to have fun along the way. But it recalibrated me to show that getting your butt kick's okay, getting cut if you're not of the standard that the organization is presenting for, let's say, a travel team. It's okay, man. It's okay. I was a late developing athlete, and I took that failure from the other sports, basketball, cut in high school. I transferred it over onto the running track, and I ran really hard and really fast because I was motivated and driven in part by failure and not having anything handed to me. That's now we got these young athletes with 72,000 Instagram followers if they're a decent baller. It's like, wow, this is going to be tough to maintain perspective these days when everything's such a big deal.
I know. I'm also at that age where I got to live in the analog world and learn life lessons before computers and social media kind of completely just took over lives of children like they do today. And it's weird to see kids who are growing up where they don't know a world without social media, the long-term effects on them. It's kind of weird. It's kind of scary. And I think we're going to be learning on the go, just kind of how to handle it. And but I think technology is evolving quicker than the human is to adapt to it. So it's kind of a weird time to have children but like I always say, people had children during the Great Depression, people had children during World War II, and I'm sure during World War I. I mean, it just during some times that things looked pretty scary then too, and people still had the courage to raise children and do it. So parenting, I guess, is probably never easy, regardless when you decide to have children.
Ricky, thanks, man. It was good and fun. Look forward to coming back sometime. Maybe we'll talk about keto. Who knows?
Yeah, definitely. Well, thanks, Brad. I really appreciate your time. Awesome conversation. It was fun to hear your personal philosophies and just the things that you've learned through your journey. And definitely have you on in the near future to talk about the Keto Reset, which the book you and Mark Sisson wrote, and talk about some of your other books you've written and your podcast and all that stuff. And we'll get more into your daily, what you eat, and all the questions people have with keto. So thanks a lot, Brad. Enjoy the rest of your day and keep in touch.
Yeah, let's do it. KetoReset.com. You can learn all about the book and the digital program that we have to give you that complete experience for how to do keto the right way. And my new podcast is called Get Over Yourself, in case you didn't catch that hint throughout our conversation. So launching pretty soon at the time of this recording, and hopefully you can go look at that. And love to be back on. You're doing a great thing here, man. You got the gift for it. So keep it up.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And you're doing. I mean, I'm inspired by people like yourself. I mean, hearing interviews with you. Oh, nice jersey. Represent.
Landon Donovan's. For those listening, I'm wearing Landon Donovan official Team USA World Cup jersey. That's the closest we can get to playing, is wearing the jersey these days.
Yeah. Well, he's still. I always say, if their best athletes weren't playing football, basketball, and other sports. I mean, Portugal, all the best athletes, they eat, breathe soccer. Spain, Germany, basically every country except the U.S. And so the fact that we're still ever competitive should be really respected. I think personally, I think USA gets they get shit on a little more than they should. I'm like, wait, there's countries that soccer's the most popular sport, and they're not doing as well as USA. So the fact that USA is ever in the mix is I think is pretty respectful. So those are always the two teams I root for. USA, I'm like the country I was born in and the country I was raised in. USA and Portugal. So unfortunately they didn't make it this year, but Italy didn't make it either, and the Dutch didn't make it either. So a lot of good teams didn't make it. So we'll hopefully next time. And I think possibly the World Cup coming to North America, in the near future. So that'd be pretty cool to actually see a World Cup game in North America. That'd be pretty badass. So, but thanks again, Brad. I know I'm taking up your time because I'm going on another long rant. But thanks, Brad. Take care, and I'll send you the links to the show and all that stuff once it's up and live.
Thanks, Ricky. That was great. Yeah, tell me when it's up. We'll promote the heck out of it.
Absolutely, Brad. Thank you. I appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, bud.
Yep. Bye.
Believe in the ripple effect.